Great. Well, thanks everybody for coming. I really want to thank Ray and Ernie for getting this together. This is a real opportunity, and I really want to thank everybody, all the producers here in particular, who took a day off their operation to come and listen to a bunch of scientists say what we think the science has to say regarding crop production in the context of increasing environmental variability. So since I started at Iowa State, my spring and fall field research has become increasingly difficult, right? Time to plant, time to harvest, time to apply precision nitrogen fertilizer applications, it's all gone down dramatically. That's clear, right? And so I can only imagine the concern this creates for farmers whose livelihood relies on timely and efficient field work, right? This is a real important challenge, as Dennis pointed out. And so much of the science my group has done in this space has really been the result of working with innovative farmers in Iowa, walking around their fields with them, sharing concerns, and exchanging information as well. And I think it's critical that we link this science to the people and the operations on the ground if we expect the science to help in the long run, right? And so I'd like to ask everyone in the room, and Dennis kind of alluded to this when he first got up here, but especially the farmers, to look at our science critically and tell us what you think, what you need, and where we can improve. This is really important for our success. You'll hear from scientists with different views, of course, right? But I think one thing we can all agree on is that there's no single solution. Our solutions to address climate change are going to be varied. They're going to be different solutions for different places on the landscape and different times. So for example, in some areas, it's going to make sense to intensify corn production. In other areas, it's going to make sense to abandon corn production. And sorting these out in the particular strategies is really the future. So let me just start into the slides here. I have a few questions that I want to address. So how will we adapt to climate change? Cynthia and Dennis just talked about increasing precipitation and intensity. And so this impacts crop productivity both directly and indirectly, right? So too much water, the roots can't grow, the crop can't photosynthesize. Indirectly, farmers have fewer workable field days to get out there and manage the crop and also implement conservation practices, right? So when there's too much water, roots can't grow deep. The water drives, it physically moves the nitrate losses to our streams and rivers. And together, those reduce nitrogen fertilizer use efficiency, which we all know is a major challenge for Iowa crop production and environmental quality. So this increasing precip, like I mentioned, not only does it make the challenges for crop production more complex, but it also challenges many of the practices that we describe as solutions to climate change. Things like cover crops, precision nitrogen fertilizer management, no-till. These things become tougher and tougher as we see this increasing precipitation and climate variability in general. And I'd say this is likely the most immediate challenge we face. So in this context, I'd like you to think about soil health and organic matter. So what's a healthy soil? Regardless of the amount of nitrogen fertilizer input we give to a corn crop, I want you to take this away. Most of the nitrogen that corn takes up in any field in Iowa will be from the soil organic matter. Most of the direct nitrogen uptake for that crop will be from the soil organic matter. Microbes living in the soil, in fact, can produce hundreds of pounds per acre of nitrate and ammonium that we buy in fertilizer every year from that organic matter, right? So organic matter is the source of the nitrogen uptake for most of the nitrogen uptake for our crops. And high organic matter levels are good, undoubtedly, but only if the microbes can transform those nutrients into crop available forms, right? And microbes can't do their job if it's too wet. So a healthy soil's got to promote microbial transformation of nutrients to crop available nutrients. And for that, the soil's got to be well aerated. So we often hear soil organic matter, high levels of soil organic matter are an important strategy to mitigate and adapt to climate change. But I'd like to ask you, where in your fields is organic matter high? So, you could look at this photo and think about that. Across a county, across a state, Soil organic matter, yeah, it's positively associated with crop yield and stability. But how about within a field? Do you have those same relationships? You know, on this field, if we look here, the wettest places are clearly where the highest organic matter levels are. I guarantee it, right? But they're also not the places with the highest yields. And so we have to think about that as we think about healthy soils. We don't want high nutrient stocks. We want high nutrient cycling and high nutrient availability. And soil health indices have to address that distinction going forward as we think about what a healthy soil is in the context of climate change. So this impact of increasing precipitation and amount, you know, it's really going to challenge how we manage our soil. Managing wet soils, though, this isn't a new challenge for Iowans, right? And sometimes we have to go back and think about the challenges our grandparents and great-grandparents faced, right? And so I want to tell a story, one of my favorite stories of working with farmers in Iowa. So I was working with a great group of farmers in Iowa. I wanted to come down and share some results from our work that year with them. I gave them a call and I said, well, how about I come down in mid to late November? It was a good fall back then. You should be all wrapped up with harvest. And they said to me, Mike, you got to be kidding me. As soon as we harvest the crop, all we do is tile. That's our most effective time to tile. And I don't have any time then. And so that was really an incredibly important moment for me. And I learned that I had to learn a lot about tile drainage and crop production in Iowa. And I think, you know, one of the most important opportunities to adapt to increasing precipitation and intensity is to improve and manage our drainage systems in the state that were given to us generations ago. So many folks criticize agricultural drainage due to environmental concerns that are absolutely real, right? But drainage is required to produce anything on most Iowa soils. And our drainage systems were installed 100 years ago when cropping systems were more diverse and there were no water quality problems. I want to highlight that. So drainage is not incompatible with water quality, right? We know that just from looking at historical records. We can have both. Drainage is also going to be a key factor in how nutrient management responds to climate change. Moving on to our third question there. So drainage increases nitrate losses downstream, no doubt about that, but that can be managed. It also improves our ability to manage nutrients, and that's really going to be important as we think about the effects of increased precipitation amount and intensity on nutrient losses and crop production, because precipitation and drainage are the two main factors right now that drive nutrient losses from our system and reduce nitrogen use efficiency. But again, you know, drainage was installed more than 50 years before Iowa ever had any water quality problems. We can have them both. You know, so I just want to show this slide real quick. This is an article from the New York Times in 1910. Iowans invested $307 million. Over 80% of that was farmers' own money to improve and make the drainage system that we have in our state. Today, that's over $10 billion. We're sitting on top of this amazing infrastructure here in the state, and we haven't been managing it for the last 100 years, by and large, right? Certainly not in an organized, thorough enough way. And I think this is going to be a major opportunity to address climate change and address the balance between crop production and environmental quality in the state. And you know, finally, drainage systems, they can be paired with these edge-of-field nutrient losses practices, such as wetlands that add diversity to the landscape. So it's not just improved crop production, treating the nutrients at the edge of the field, but we can also use these systems to add some diversity back into the landscape. So, you know, while I focused on increasing precipitation amount and intensity, Dennis pointed out that drought is also important, right? How are we going to deal with drought? Or years when there's too much moisture in the spring but not enough in the summer, like many areas of Iowa this year. We're going to have to think about the long term. We're going to have to think about opportunities to improve drainage and provide irrigation, right? You know, generations ago, we made this enormous investment in agricultural infrastructure in the state. And to address climate change, we're going to have to invest in the infrastructure in the state again. And that might include drainage. It might include drainage coupled with irrigation. It might include more diversity on the landscape, as Emily will talk about here in a few minutes. It's going to be all of the above. But it's going to certainly require creativity, foresight, and a long-term, thorough plan from farmers, scientists, and policymakers together. And with that, I will pass it off to Rick here.